In this video, we're going to focus on starting out the process of a VA claim. So if you're a veteran who's recently been discharged, or you're a disabled veteran many years removed from service and thinking about starting up a claim, stick around. First, let's talk about the VA claims process and the appeal system as a whole and how it's supposed to work. You first start by filing a claim. The VA will issue an initial decision. If you're not happy with that decision, you can file an appeal. You have three options. The first is if you want to submit new evidence. That's what's called the supplemental appeal lane. The second is the higher level review lane, which is where someone else at the VA will review the decision based on what's already in there. And the third option is appealing up to the Board of Veterans Appeals, or the BVA. From there, they issue a new decision and you can continue appealing until you're happy with your decision. So like I said earlier, this is going to be the start of the series, which means we're going to talk about your DD-214. Let's freshen up everybody's minds on what a DD-214 is. The Defense Department issues each veteran a DD Form 214, identifying the veteran's condition of discharge: honorable, general, other than honorable, or dishonorable. It's the report of separation that contains information normally needed to verify your military service for benefits purposes. So it contains information like the date and place of entry and release into active duty, your home address at the time of entry and separation, your last duty assignment and rank, your military job specialty, military education, decorations, medals, badges, citations, campaign awards, your total time of service, and your separation information. That's the first step, is thinking about your DD-214 and how to get that. Next, you want to ask yourself, what are your disabilities? So you want to think about what happened in service that may have caused what you're currently suffering from. So think about in-service events, incidents, or stressors. Maybe you recall a bad fall that you had in service and your shoulder has never been the same since. Or maybe you hurt your back while carrying something that was extremely heavy, or maybe something fell on you. As far as your mental health, think back to those traumatic events that led to your depression or anxiety and ultimately PTSD. Maybe you already know what's been bothering you and you're finally at a place where you can get help. So the next thing to do is start thinking about an intent to file. An intent to file is basically when you let the VA know that you intend to file a claim for disability. It sets a potential start date or an effective date for your benefits. So when you do this, your start date for your benefits will be earlier than the day that you file a claim. So that's the advantage to filing an intent to file. Now, how do you do that? The first thing, and probably the easiest thing, is you can do it through eBenefits. You can also call the VA at 800-827-1000, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Or you can submit an intent to file for compensation form and you can mail it, or you can bring it to a local VA regional office. If you're going to mail it, you want to mail it to the Department of Veterans Affairs Claims Intake Center, P.O. Box 4444, Janesville, Wisconsin 53547-4444. Now, after you submit your intent to file, you have 1 year to complete and file your claim. You do this by submitting a VA Form 21-526-EZ. You would submit that form either physically, like you did with the intent to file, or you can do it online. The next step is to look at your evidence. So you know you have your disability and something that happened in service. You want to think about, can you prove what happened in service? So can you prove how you hurt your back? Do you have medical records? Did you go to sick bay? Can you get statements from people who served with you? Or do you have friends or family who have known you from before and after service and can talk about the real changes that they saw in you? We want to know what cards you're playing with here, so to speak. So next, ask yourself, do you have any existing claims that were denied? Are there any existing medical records that can corroborate your claim? Were you awarded any stars or accolades that can help you piece together your time in service? So if you need to prove that you were in combat, do you have a Bronze Star, or any of the things to show what could have happened in service that led to your current disability? Now, as far as your military records, if you don't have those already, you're going to want to request them. How do you do that? To request military service records, they're held at the National Personnel Records Center. You want to use what's called the Standard Form 180, or SF-180. It's the request pertaining to military records. That's the recommended method to send a request for your military service information. And the form has all the necessary information to locate a record, so you're going to want to provide as much information as possible and send copies of any service documents that you might have. If the VA denied your claim, you want to know what evidence they used to make their decision. So that's why you want to request your service records to see what you're working with and understand what it's going to take to prove your claim. The last step is establishing your diagnosed disability if you're not being compensated for it. So what condition is it that you have that you're trying to get compensation for? Perhaps you have gone to the doctor, you've gotten treatment, you've been getting treatment for this condition for years. You can request those medical records to show what your current diagnosis is. Or maybe you haven't gotten treatment. A lot of times veterans, especially with mental health diagnoses, don't seek treatment for different reasons. And so maybe you don't have a diagnosed disability or you don't know exactly what your condition is. You can still file a claim, because what happens is when you file a claim, they have a duty to assist. So they're supposed to help you with your claim. The next step that usually follows is sending you to a C&P exam, a compensation and pension examination. Ultimately, a VA examiner will evaluate you and they will provide their opinion as to what your diagnosis is. So even if you don't know, you can still file a claim and try and get compensation for what it is you think you're suffering from. It's also important to keep in mind how the VA rates your condition. So you'll want to understand what the criteria the VA and their doctors will use to review your disability and your symptoms. Each different condition and diagnosis is listed out, and the VA assigns diagnostic codes, and they assign a rating based on the severity of each condition. So basically, they'll be looking at your symptoms and the severity of your symptoms to determine what rating would correspond to that and what you would be entitled to. For example, if you have a back condition or a neck condition, the most common thing they'll look at is your range of motion, and depending on how far you can bend forward or backwards, they will assign a rating based on that. If it's a mental condition, they will look at your social and occupational impairment, so how much your symptoms prevent you from interacting with others or being at a workplace, things like that. And they will then assign a rating based on those symptoms and severity. One thing that really helps to establish the severity of your symptoms is what's called a disability benefits questionnaire, or a DBQ. So if you have a doctor that you see regularly, perhaps they would be willing to help you. You can take one of these forms, you can find them online, depending on which condition it is that you're filing for. And you could have them fill out the information on there to help the VA determine the severity of your condition and then what rating you would be entitled to. Well, that's all for today.